everyone, welcome back to Coffee with Crainer. Today I have Vince Lapico, president of VLC Custom Homes, a premier building firm servicing the Windsor-Essex region, started in 2010, if I don't believe.
That's correct.
If I'm correct there. And then you're also past president of the Windsor-Essex Home Builders Association, heavily involved with Fight Like Mason, We Care for Kids. So a lot of great things in the community, and today we're going to be talking about how you built your firm, and some of the exciting things with the HST, and a lot more. So thanks for being here, Vince.
Thanks for having me.
So first question: favorite place for coffee in Windsor-Essex?
It's got to be, unfortunately, in the front seat of my pickup truck at Tim Hortons drive-thru.
Okay.
So
yeah, just black.
Black. Sometimes I get crazy and have 2 milks, but
Yes. Yeah. No, that's my preference as well.
Yeah.
So 2010, you decided to launch VLC.
Correct.
What were you doing prior to 2010?
Before that, I was in health insurance. I used to manage a really large book of business for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan.
Okay.
About $300 million worth of insurance.
Yep.
Managed small and medium groups. Mm-hmm. And when I left, I was on track to becoming the account manager for Ford North America. Quick story, my dad was a home builder, so I kind of grew up in the industry. I didn't really work for him a lot, just kind of on weekends and whenever he needed help.
Yeah.
My dad got sick and passed away, and I realized shortly after that if I was going to kill myself working for somebody, I might as well do it working for myself. Mm-hmm. And I started VLC Custom Homes. It was actually, when I started, it was Vince Lapico Construction.
Okay.
So first job was a little bathroom renovation.
Yeah.
And then a basement renovation, and then more renovations and some small additions, and then turned into building houses, and so it's completely organic. And a lot of people think because my dad was a builder that I took over his firm, which just wasn't there. There was nothing to take over when he had passed away.
Yeah.
So it's a great thing. I do it because it's my passion. I love it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, a lot of people in our industry do what they do because it's all they know. Mm-hmm. They don't really like the work, let alone have passion for it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying everybody. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are really good at what they do and have a passion. But
Excellent. And that first home build, walk us through, how did you land that? Because it's a big step going from renovations to building and designing your first home.
Right. Yeah. So the very first home I built is actually a very good friend of mine now. I met him at an event at Walk River Brewery, and we just started chatting up, whatever. And I told him what I do, and he says, "Oh, I'm looking at building a house." Mm-hmm. I said, "Well, I'd be more than happy to help you out." And we sat down and went through what they were looking for, put together the pricing, and it just worked out.
What was that first build like compared to what you're doing now?
Oh, it was a beautiful home. It's a beautiful home on Herdman and LaSalle.
Yeah.
It's backs onto the woods. It was a great first client to have because they trusted me and my people and what we do, and they just kind of let us do our thing, and it just turned out amazing. It was a beautiful home. Anything
you learned from that first build that you carried on to future builds, whether it be the system, the way you're doing it?
Yeah, there's when you're going from doing because we did larger renovations and additions and stuff like that, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 jobs, but when you're jumping up to 8, 9, 10, $1 million, those jobs are different because there's a lot more moving pieces.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you have everybody kind of monitored and managed and scheduled. And communication is really important. I would say that my biggest lesson on that first build was, communicating properly with my client. It's not that we were ever, miscommunicative, but there was always a room for more communication.
Absolutely. So. And your day-to-day now, what does it look like?
I still am hands-on with a lot of stuff. Actually, I'm not just a drive-by contractor. I actually know how to do the work. Being raised in construction, my dad was a framer, so I know how to frame homes, and I know how to do finished carpentry. I do a lot of site. You'll see me a lot of times on a job site pushing a broom. My biggest thing is I can't stand a messy job site. Yeah. So I always keep things clean, tidy, and organized. So that's like my day-to-day role.
And what part of the build do you like the best? Obviously completion, everybody likes that part.
Yeah, I like when the foundation goes in. I like to see the groundbreaking. The groundbreaking is amazing when the foundation's there because you go from literally just a piece of dirt to like, wow, there's going to be a house here. And then once the framing's done, I'm super excited because then we can move on to all the fun stuff. And I love the framing aspect of it as well. we do a lot of kind of technologically advanced homes where we have a lot of built-in stuff, and that's always fun for like the home audio and video and data stuff and just automation. That's fun. But really, my favorite day is the day you start primer. The day you start primer, the smell of paint to me is the smell of progress.
Yes.
So once you can smell that paint, you know you're getting close. You know things are happening. You know that's great.
And now every builder has a certain style. How would you describe your style?
Our homes are transitional, which is kind of timeless. Like our VLC Custom Homes, timeless quality, craftsmanship. Those are our mantra. That's what we do. So we want stuff that's going to be timeless. We want stuff that's of the most paramount quality and craftsmanship. So I've got people that work for me that've been with me since day one. So like 99.99, everybody has that one oddball customer, but like all of my customers I'm good friends with. I can go on their front door, they'll invite me in for coffee.
Yeah.
But it's a great thing.
And is there a project that stands out to you as the pinnacle of your career so far?
I built a house on St. Francis as a model home that was top 5 custom homes in all of Canada.
Wow.
And that was built right kind of COVID time, so it was kind of crazy trying to get it all together, making sure that it all came together in the proper way, but it did. And it was just, to me, that house was, I was inspired by a piece of wood that I found at one of my suppliers. It was a piece of quarter sawn white oak. And I asked him, I said, "Give me a favor, just throw a little bit of finish on this. I just want to see what this looks like."
Yeah.
And that was the inspiration for the whole house. I mean, I did the floors, all the interior doors were solid white oak quarter sawn. I had a floating steel staircase with the white oak treads.
Wow.
And all that inspiration came from one piece of wood. So it's funny what inspires you, and then to have the ability to take that little inspiration and turn it into something
much bigger.
Much bigger. Yeah.
And now, going back to your work with the Home Builders Association, how did you get involved, and then ultimately becoming president?
Well, I remember my dad was involved in the Home Builders Association, and he would go to the meetings or whatever. And I'm not from Windsor originally, so if you're not from Windsor, Windsor is one of those cities that's kind of hard to break into friend groups and do stuff, because a lot of the people are friends from their friends from kindergarten or JK. And they've never really ventured out past their friend group. They have their group of people, and that's it. I'm fortunate enough to have like a very welcoming family. I have a larger family, so I was able to make friends that way. But in the professional world, it was difficult to kind of get involved and learn and meet and do stuff. So I said, let me get involved with the Home Builders Association. So I went to a few meetings, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And me being a learner, I like to learn all the time. I was like, I really want to learn more about this business. So I asked the president at the time, I think it was Ezio Totaro from Gintar, and I was like, how do I get involved? How can I be like on the board or whatever? He's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. So I got on the board, and then we were on the board, and next thing you know, a couple presidents later, they're like, you're president. I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So I was kind of voluntold to become president. The organization, prior to COVID, was really losing traction. And like during COVID, it literally was almost gone. We had like 22 members when I took over. So when I took over, I was fortunate enough to surround myself with the right people. We built a really good board, and we attracted a lot of new membership. We did some really good events, that we wanted to show people the value of being a member of the Home Builders Association, and we did that at a very, very high level. We had an event at Beech Grove where we had all the mayors come through, and we talked to them about home building and the barriers of home building, and got commitments from them in front of our entire group that they're going to work with us to help eliminate red tape, to help speed processes, to help doing these things. So they understand. And at that point, and this is like 2022, that things were still kind of like robust in the market. Things were still moving pretty quickly, but that downturn was just around the corner. You know what I mean? It was just around the corner, and we could see that there was that bottleneck, and all this stuff is pent up, and it's just not moving. And we needed to get that bottleneck removed, the red tape removed. We needed to get it, because the biggest issue was people were still working from home. So you couldn't contact anybody in the department that you needed to get an approval for, because they weren't at their desk. They didn't return emails. It was a really, really tough time to get things done. But we were able to, really get through that, develop an amazing organization, I was president for almost 3 years. Usually we're president for just a year. And then Brent Glendard from BK Cornerstone took over. Amazing guy, took things to the next level. And then he passed the torch to Norbert. But since then I've been on the board of directors for the Ontario Home Builders Association. I was on the executive committee there that actually started the conversations with the government to get the HST removed, to do some sort of relief, because we could see what was coming our way. And I'm very proud of the work that we did at OHBA in collaboration with BUILD, which is the Toronto Home Builders Association. So Building Infrastructure Land Development is what that stands for. They have a very huge, obviously, presence in Toronto. So we brought in a third party to actually produce data to show we're not just talking that we want to save money on houses and get rid of sales tax, but let me show you what's going to happen if we don't. And we did that. And home building in Ontario, it's $40 billion. You take and remove 70% of that, because that's what's happened. The market has gone by 70%. You can do the simple math. You're $12 billion from a $40 billion market. So you're losing housing, you're losing jobs, you're losing talent. Because what's happening is Ontario and British Columbia are the ones that are faring worse across the country, but the prairies and the like Newfoundland and those areas, they're going crazy. They're going gangbusters. So they're working, and what's happening is our talent is leaving because there's no work for them here. So hopefully, like the work that OHBA has done in coordination with like Kevin Lee at CHBA, I'm also on the board of directors for the Canadian Home Builders Association, working at the federal level. We've been able to work together and put together a program that's going to really be beneficial. It's going to, if you're looking at buying $1 million house before tax, it's that's $1 million. But you put tax, that's another $130,000 on a house. Now there was already the $24,000 rebate, so now it's $106,000 in addition you're saving. Like that's huge money, and that's real money.
Yes.
So that's that's really the work that being a member of OHBA or CHBA or NAHBA, because I'm also a member of the North American Home Builders Association and also a member of the Michigan Home Builders Association.
Wow.
So we're looking at expanding into working in the U.S. market. So it's a really important thing to be a part of an organization that understands your day-to-day woes and can help you grow.
Yes.
And they really help you grow by putting you in the room with other people that have the same situations you're in. Because if you are facing a situation by yourself, you have to come up with a conclusion or a resolution to that situation on your own. If you're in a group of other people that are in the same situation as you guys can have communications with each other and come up with some sort of plan.
Yes.
So that's like with any industry. That's what's really important about being a member of your home builder association.
Fantastic. Now we'll get to HST in a second. Aside from that barrier that's being removed, what other barriers exist for builders right now that may be leading to a slow construction market?
Well, we have a problem with serviceable land. People think, you look around, there's land everywhere, but that land doesn't have sewers, it doesn't have gas lines, it doesn't have hydro, it doesn't have all the things required to build houses. So serviceable land is a big issue, and there's a lot of different entities that are involved in the approval of making a piece of farm a subdivision. You have to go to Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Fisheries, you have to do traffic studies, you have to do noise pollution studies, you have to do like archaeological studies, you have to do wildlife studies. There's so many different studies that are required to do all of these things, and each one of those studies take time. And when you're in that process of requesting that permission to do that, let's say I fill out Form A, and Form A requests this information. I submit Form A to Agency B, and Agency B sits on that form. They look, I go, oh, this is missing, back of the pile. They don't call you, they don't contact you, they don't let you know that something's missing. So you reach out to them and go, hey, what's going on? Oh, well, this information's missing. Okay, well, we didn't know we needed that information. Okay, go get that information. So you take that information, you put it back to them. But now that information also needs to go to organization A and C, and it's just OHBA and like Windsor-Essex Home Builders, we've been working with the County of Essex to try and streamline that system, right? So that we can kind of get one roadmap. This is what we need to do to get a subdivision plan approved. This is what we need to do to get a building permit approved. This is what needs to happen. So we're working at the municipal levels and so your local level, your county level, your provincial level. We're working on all those different levels to try and get a streamlined process so that we can make that better. The biggest issue, like I said, is with serviceable land and the cost of land. It used to be the first house that I bought for myself in 2002 was a 1,400 square foot raised ranch in South Windsor. It cost me $210,000. The house, the land, everything. I can't buy a piece of dirt for $500,000 in LaSalle right now. By the time I get the dirt, I get the legal fees, I get the permits, I get the drawings, I get the bank fees, all the other stuff. I'm $600,000-$700,000 before I stick a shovel in the ground. So how am I supposed to create anything that's going to be like, I'm not going to put a $200,000 house on that piece of property because number one, it doesn't exist, and number two, who wants to pay $1 million for a tiny little house? So that's the biggest problem the industry is facing right now. The land costs, the input costs, the material costs, the labor costs. People think, oh, there's a big shortage of stuff. The costs are coming down. They're not coming down.
Yeah.
I get emails every day from suppliers. This material's going up. This material's going up. This material's going up. Labor is going up. Nothing's going down. Minimum wage goes up. When minimum wage goes up, inflation goes up. Everything goes up. So it's a tough battle to work right now. You just really need to manage a very efficient business and be, I hate to say transparent with your clientele, with your costing, but you really need them to understand, what the costs are and why things are what they are. Because people think that builders and developers all drive Ferraris, have yachts, fly private. No, sir, I drive a pickup truck, I fly Spirit. You know what I mean? So there's some people out there that have been doing this a long time and they're in that place and they've earned that and there's nothing wrong with that. Yep. But just because you're a home builder or you're a developer, it doesn't mean that you're, king of the world. It's a very expensive game to play.
Yes. Yeah. Where do you see builders going wrong? Like you said, it's not a money printing machine all the time.
No.
Where can people easily go wrong? Is it over leveraging?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of builders right now that are way over leveraged. A lot of them. And unfortunately, we were told that we need to build 1.5 million homes in Ontario, and this was like, we gotta go, and all this land finally came on, and people just bought it all because the market's on fire, and we have to do all this. Well, the market is no longer on fire, and that land was bought at very high dollars. And there's a lot of people that are leveraged, and it's just going to have to work itself out.
How do you, in this market, survive? Would you say how are builders surviving?
I would say that the established good builders that have good relationships and run good businesses are going to be okay. It's going to be tough. Like they're not going to make a lot of money, but they'll survive. I think that a lot of the builders that jumped in because they thought it's a quick way to make a few bucks, this is the storm that washes away that. Yeah. It's needed.
Any advice for someone that's looking to become a builder right now or developer right now? Would you say don't do it?
I would never discourage anybody from trying to do anything. I would just say exercise caution and make sure you understand the market that you're getting into. A lot of people want to get into purpose-built rentals because there's the CMHC financing process. There's a lot of other stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that has just come online and is coming online in the next quarter to 2 quarters. That market's reaching saturation. So you got to be really careful with that stuff. I'm thinking that the opportunity in this market is going to be for infill lots. Buying older homes, turning them into like multi-family, but not sixplexes and stuff like that. Like, making legal duplexes, things like that. That's kind of what you're seeing a lot of stuff happening now. For me, on the custom stuff, custom homes will remain custom homes. People who want, something unique and individual are going to still want that unique and individual thing. So builders such as myself and the other high-end builders in the state or in the city will be, will be okay. Especially the reputable ones that have been around for a long time. They do a good job, and
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it's a interesting market right now.
Absolutely.
Do you see HST creating a shift and increasing the number of new build homes?
I think HSC is it's gonna help. I mean, anything's gonna help, right? So they're also trying to do a reduction of development charges. They're playing around with the idea of putting development charges at closing as opposed to in the beginning, just to kind of offset some of the costs of construction. But it's still a cost that's going to be there. You're just deferring it to the end.
For sure. Yeah.
Let's see. The HST is going to help in the lower middle market because that's really where you're going to get the most benefit.
Yeah.
Homes that are over 1.8 to 2, $3,
HST
$4 million.
Sliding scale, it'll drop a bit.
Yeah. So you're still going to save some. There's going to be some, but it's not going to be like no HST. I was talking with a client. They want to build a multi-million-dollar home. Like, I heard this thing. There's going to be no HST. I'm like, that's definitely not going to benefit what you're looking to do.
Yeah. I think once it's past 1.8.
Yeah, it's
HST's gone.
Yeah.
The rebate at least.
Yeah.
I personally just on the mortgage side, I could see this being attractive to first-time buyers looking to build new construction within the $500 to $700K price point.
Absolutely, but where does that exist? It doesn't exist right now, and that's the biggest problem.
Maybe on the semi side.
Yeah, but even semis are 8-9 million. It's up there. The land costs are really the hardest thing. I was actually we were in Ottawa and we had a meeting with the Build Canada Homes. They're going to build 40,000 homes in Canada, and I was asking them, I'm like, so who's going to own these homes? How does this work? Well, they're all going to be pretty much rentals.
Yep.
So they're not really going to help the housing market. And I was like, I hate to go back to this, but if you remember, obviously you and I weren't here, but post-war, back in the 50s, all these little 30-foot, 40-foot, 50-foot lots popped up all over the place. They had this nice little starter home, it had a garage, didn't have a garage, nothing attached. We need to get past this. I got to have a 2-car garage. I got to have 3 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and we need to get back to the point where we can say, hey, let's have a modest 900 square foot 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home that you can buy, get into home ownership, and use that as your leaping
Good point.
board. So that's the part of the market that's missing.
Yeah.
So if we can figure out a way to have some sort of federally subsidized land where we could do mechanized home building and in smaller scale, like we could help with home ownership. That's really where my focus in lobbying with CHBA, is gonna focus. I really like to. I mean, I don't know the feasibility. I don't know whether or not the government wants to get into owning land. But by the sounds of it, with Build Canada Homes, they kind of are. So there's some ideas for opportunities, but we need to figure out a way just to make those things come to fruition.
You make a good point, Vince. Is buyer expectations, I think, are way too high.
Oh, yeah.
Some customers, I'll have them pre-approved for $400,000, and you can still find properties at 400, even in the 3s. Sometimes our clients are buying in the 2s. Yes, the neighborhood's not top notch. The house needs some work, but it's a good starting point. But we on the other side, we meet with first-time buyers, and they're expecting $700,000 because they see that their friend on social media has a $700,000 house, and they're in a nice neighborhood, and why can't I be in that spot?
Right.
And some are almost disappointed when it's coming back at the 400 price point.
Yeah.
But like you had said at the beginning, becoming more comfortable with a minimalist lifestyle, smaller build, and then working your way up, right?
I think it's really important. Unfortunately, we live in a social media world where your attention spans at 8 seconds. You see something interesting, like, wow, that's cool. They're doing that. I can do that, right? But they're not taking into consideration credit scores, income,
parents co-signing.
You know what I mean? Like they're not taking in consideration all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think that just really needs to happen is there just needs to be kind of I hate to say the come to Jesus moment where people have a realization that like, hey, this is reality. This is where I live. This is the world in which I can play, and I need to play in this world. And hopefully, I can, through hard work, determination, some good luck, whatever, go into this world.
Yeah.
You know, so people think that they're entitled to this world out here, and they haven't even earned this world down here.
Yeah.
You know, so it really becomes a matter of just being realistic with who you are and where you are. You know,
Patience, time in the market, right?
Yeah.
How can, if those are watching or looking to build with VLC Custom Homes, what would you recommend? How do they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can just reach out to me through, they can call me directly. I have my cell phone, listed on the website, so you can call me directly. And, you can go to the website. You can reach out to us through social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook. Like all those things.
Yeah.
For me, it's really important to understand that the builder and a client choose each other. Okay. A lot of people think that construction firms are just outbidding jobs, and then whoever gets the lowest bid gets the job. That's not how we work.
Yeah.
I've
want to make sure it's a good fit.
Exactly. I've actually met with clients, and I've told them that I really think that your project's really cool, but I don't know if we're a good chemistry fit for each other. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, this is something you and I are gonna have to work with together very intimately for the next year.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to communicate with each other, and we need to be able to bounce ideas off each other, and we need to be able to work with each other. I already was in the military. I don't need to have another drill sergeant telling me what to do 24/7.
Yeah.
That's not really, how we want to do our work.
Yeah.
We want to work collaboratively. This isn't, you work for me, you do what I tell you to do.
Yes.
That's not how this works.
Yeah.
We work with each other.
Yep.
So it's really important to understand your clientele. People come up to me, hey, can I get a quote? I'm more than happy to sit down and talk with you and see what you're looking to do.
Yep.
Oh, I got quotes from this guy, this guy, this guy. Well, if you're looking for the lowest price, that's not who we are. Not that we're expensive, but you're going to get what you pay for with us.
Yes.
So people, when you buy with us, you spend $1 with us, you get $1, maybe $1.05. Other people, you buy with them, you spend $1, maybe you get 60 cents.
Yeah.
So you're getting what you pay for.
Yes.
So it's really important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all your time, Vince, and your insights and the advocacy work that you're doing with the numerous home associations. I don't know how you sleep at night, but busy guy, and be sure to check him out. Hope you enjoyed this episode.